Hey, sixth graders. This is going to be our new unit, Unit 7. We just wrapped up Unit 5 in our lesson yesterday. And at the end of a unit, usually we would be taking another quick quiz, maybe a big assessment at the end of it. And we are just not doing that because there's not really a way to fairly assess everybody right now with our distance learning model. So instead, we're just going to move on to our next unit. Typically in class, we would just be going to our next unit in the book, which is Unit 6. It's all about volume, which is another geometry unit. But we are skipping Unit 6 and moving on to Unit 7 because what the district is providing in their packets each week is starting in Unit 7. So I thought, hey, let's jump ahead. That way we can have some instruction going with those lessons, just in case any of you are doing those district packets. So we're going to go ahead and skip Unit 6. If we have time before the end of the year, we'll come back to that. So here we go for our first activity. This whole unit is actually going to be all about what? Let me find our topic here. It's all about ratios and rates. So we did this back in Unit 1 at the beginning of the year. And this is where we talked about factor puzzles, and we looked at a lot of tables where it was like, I can't show you in this book because it's in our student workbook number 1. This is student workbook number 2. But in our, here, I can just show you in my teacher's book. So my teacher's book, it was back when we did these. You guys remember when we had, hey, find our unit rate and start finding patterns? This is what we were doing back in Unit 1 at the beginning of the year. So in Unit 7, we're coming back to the same idea. It's just going to be a little bit more complicated because the numbers get more tricky. They're going to involve more fractions and decimals as we move forward through the unit. So what we're doing today specifically with the idea of ratios and rates is our lesson objective is to use tables and equivalent ratios to compare ratios. That's what we're going to be doing, is comparing. We're going to graph ratios and use graphs to compare the ratios as well. So let's get started. So it says grasshopper green paint has a blue to yellow paint ratio of 2:7. Now I want you guys to remember that the way this is written, blue comes first and the number 2 comes first in that ratio. Yellow comes second and number 7 comes second. So what that means is they don't tell us how much they are putting into this new grasshopper green mix. We don't know if it's 2 cups or 2 gallons or 2 quarts of paint. We don't really know, but whatever measurement they're using, there's 2 of it. So for every 2 units of blue, they're mixing it with 7 units of yellow. Okay. Well, this paint company also has a color called Gorgeous Green. And for Gorgeous Green, the paint has a blue-yellow ratio of 4:5. So we're going to be comparing ratios during this activity. You can find out which ratio makes paint that's more blue and which ratio makes paint that's more yellow. So to find out which paint is more blue, you can make the values for the yellow the same. In other words, if they both have equal yellow, then of the grasshopper green and the gorgeous green, if we can make their yellows have equal numbers, like let's say they both have like 5 cups of something, then whichever one has more blue is going to be the bluer paint. Okay. So one way to do this is to make the value for the yellow be the product of the yellow values in the basic ratios. Now what that means, the product of the yellow values. Well, our yellow value is 5 in Gorgeous Green and it's 7 in Grasshopper Green. What does the product of something mean? The product is always talking about multiplication. So when it says what's the product of the yellow values, well, the product of Grasshopper Green yellow, one of the values there is 7, and then in Gorgeous Green for yellow, it's 5. So the product of 7 and 5 is 35. So we're going to complete these tables. Notice how for Grasshopper Green, they set it up and they said, hey, blue to yellow. Grasshopper Green, blue to yellow was 2:7. So they made the blue have 2 and the yellow have 7. Okay, they did the same thing for the gorgeous green. Gorgeous green was blue to yellow, which was 4 to 5. So for blue to yellow, it's 4 to 5. Hopefully you guys can see where they got those numbers. These come directly from up here. Okay. Well, now down here, it's like they're starting to fill out a little factor puzzle for us, and they have 35 down here for both of them. Now, where did the 35 come from? Well, if you remember, we got the 35 right here. It said if you want to make the yellows have the same value, just find the product of the two yellow values. So our yellow value was 7, and our other yellow value was 5. So if you multiply those together, if we say that the another ratio for each of them could be 35, now we have to figure out, to keep that paint color the same, how many blues would we need? Now this is where a factor puzzle comes into play. We did factor puzzles at the beginning of the year, and one of the things that we started noticing with factor puzzles was that what you can do, instead of writing it like this is what we did at the beginning. We would do 4, 5, 35, and we tried to figure out the outside numbers. So if I could kind of get your memories going a little bit, we said, well, what numbers would work like on the top and bottom here? And it kind of works like a multiplication table, remember? So we said like 5 times 1 gives us 5. And if there's a 5 on the top, that 5 would slide down. 5 times 7 is 35. So the 7 slides across, this 1 slides across. And then we said, well, how do we get to 4? 1 times 4, so the 4 has to slide down. And that helps us figure out our missing number right here, because 7 times 4 is 28. So I don't know if you guys remember doing that from the beginning of the year, but that's how you solve a factor puzzle. Well, one thing that we started to notice after doing factor puzzles was that there's a pattern that could be faster than doing the factor puzzle. If you notice, going, for example, in this one, from top to bottom, with multiplication or division, how do we get from the 5 to the 35? It's 5 times 7. Well, we can do that same thing right here to get to the bottom. If we also do a times 7, 4 times 7, we will get 28. And that is what we got when we did our factor puzzle right here. Okay. Now, I don't know why I started with gorgeous green instead of grasshopper green. I think because there was space over here to write. But it's going to be that same idea over here on the grasshopper green table. So we're going to look for a pattern. How do we get from 7 to 35? When we multiply it by 5. 7 times 5 is 35. Well, if we copy that same thing, because we want to keep the same rate on our table, we did times 5 on the right, so we're going to do times 5 on the left. So the blue becomes 2 times 5, which is 10. Okay, so what was the point of doing that? Well, what we just did is we changed these ratios. So gorgeous green, if you did 4 blues and 5 yellows, it would be the same exact color if you did 28 blues and 35 yellows, because all we did was multiply both of them by 7. So it's the exact same color, there's just way more paint, okay? And same with grasshopper green. It started out with 2 blues and 7 yellows mixed together, but we took 5 units of that, and we have way more paint now, and now it's 10 blues and 35 yellows. So what this did is we made our yellows identical. Now in both of them, gorgeous green and grasshopper green both have 35 units of yellow. So the question is, which paint is more blue? Why? And I would say that if the yellows are equal, then we can look at the blues to determine which one's more blue. What do you guys think is more blue? 10 units of blue or 28 units of blue? Clearly, the 28 units of blue is more, and it's more by a lot. So we're going to say gorgeous green is more blue. Okay. So when their yellows are the same, gorgeous green has 28 units of blue. Grasshopper green only has 10. Okay, so the value for gorgeous green for the blue is 28. The value for grasshopper green for blue is only 10. So the one that's more blue, when we equaled out their yellows, the one that ended up having more blue was gorgeous green. Okay, now using that same logic, then which paint is less blue? Grasshopper green. And a couple of things we could think about. We could say that the grasshopper green is less blue because 10 is less than 28. And also, just by logic, if gorgeous green is more blue, then grasshopper green has to be less blue. Okay, so number 5. To find out which paint is more yellow, make the values for blue the same. Complete the ratio tables. So now, instead of trying to figure out which one is more blue, we're going to use the same numbers from the beginning of the page when it said grasshopper green is 2 to 7. Grasshopper green is still 2 to 7 down here. Gorgeous green is 4 to 5. So gorgeous green down here is 4 to 5. So basically this table looks the same as the table that's right here. Okay, we have 2 to 7 for grasshopper green, 4 to 5 on gorgeous green. But what are we doing that's different? Well, here, let me close my curtains really quick so we don't have this weird light shining. Oh, it's on the other side. There, now we don't have that big glaring light on the page. Sorry, guys. So they're basically the same, but on the yellow side, we wanted yellow to be equal so we could find out what was more blue. This time, they want to know, make the blues equal to find out which is more yellow. So if I want to force the blues to be equal, we need to multiply the product of our blues. Or not multiply the product, multiply our two blue values to find the product. Remember on yellow, it said multiply the two yellows, which was 7 and 5, and we put 35 there. So this time, we're going to multiply the two blues, which is 2 times 4, which is 8. So both of the blues are going to be forced to be equal. Just like the yellows were forced to be equal, they were 35. Now we're going to force the blues to be equal, which is 8. Okay, so how do we figure out the rest of this factor puzzle or the rest of this ratio table? Well, how do we get from 2 to 8? Times 4. 2 times 4 is 8. Well, if we do it on the left side of the table, we have to copy that on the right side. 7 times 4 is 28. Okay, so our new yellow value for grasshopper green is 28. Now for gorgeous green, it's similar. How do we get from 4 to 8? Times 2. 4 times 2 is 8. It's going to be the same for the yellow. We have to copy it. If it was times 2 on the left, we're going to do times 2 on the right to make our rates stay equivalent. So now it's 5 times 2, which is 10. So the value of yellow is 10. So based on this information, which paint is more yellow? Well, the blues were tied at 8, so our value for yellow is 28 and 10. 28 is the one that is more. So which paint is more yellow? Grasshopper green, because we can see the more yellow right here. Okay, which paint is less yellow? The one that has less yellow. It's only 10, which is gorgeous green. All right, let's flip our page and see what else we have in store. So now we get to graph. Number 8 says, look back at the tables in exercises 2 and 5 on page 271. That's just the page that we just did right here. Write the 3 ratios for each paint color in these tables. All right, so for grasshopper green, the first ratio was 2 to 7. I see that right here, so I'm going to write that one down. 2 blue, 7 yellow. Also grasshopper green, we found out 10 and 35. And also grasshopper green, if I go down here, 2 to 7, which we already have. Remember, that's the same as in the first table. But it's also 8 and 28. So it's just having us compile all this information into one big table. And now we need to go back and do the gorgeous green. So for gorgeous green, the blue to yellow ratio was 4 to 5. It was also 28 to 35. And finally, down here, we already did the 4 to 5, but it was also 8 to 10. So that was number 8, was just, hey, make a new table that has all that information together. Now it says graph 2 points from each table. Draw and label a line for grasshopper green and a line for gorgeous green. Okay, so I'm going to do my grasshopper green in this color because it's what I'd made my table in. So it says graph 2 points. Now there are 3 points here. We have the point 27, we have the point 1035, and we have the point 828. So remember that when you're looking at a table, your points are always just the left is your X value and the right is your Y value. So these become our points of our coordinates, okay? Now it says we only have to graph 2. You could graph all 3 if you want to, but I'm just going to graph the 2 that fit. Now if I look at here, I notice that my Y axis only goes to 30. So I'm not going to pick 1035 because it's not going to fit on the graph that they gave me. So I'm going to graph 2, 7. So over 2, up 7. And then I'm going to graph 8, 28. So here's 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I need to go up, being careful to stay on that same line. Here's 20, here's 25, 26, 27, 28. So there's 8, 28. So I graphed 2 points, draw and label a line for grasshopper green. Okay, so here I want to be really careful to use a straight edge. In class, sometimes we say, just kind of guess. I don't have a ruler with me at home, but I do have a straight edge. I made sure to bring it with me to my lesson. It's just the edge of a folder. You could really use anything that is a straight line that you could use kind of like a straight edge from a ruler. So if you guys can see, I have my 2 coordinates. I'm just going to draw a line in between them like this. Okay, now would it make sense to extend beyond that? Yes, I could, because my ratios do continue through that line. Like if I had 0 of each one, that's how much blue and yellow paint I would be using, would be right here. So it does make sense to extend my line all the way through it. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and graph my gorgeous green. So I have the coordinates 4, 5, 28, 35, and also 8, 10. Now, can I fit all of these on here? It said graph 2, so I only need to pick 2 of these. Now the 2 that I'm going to pick, I cannot fit 28, 35. My x-axis does not go to 28, my y-axis does not go to 35. So I'm going to do over 4, up 5. I'm also going to do over 8, up 10. 6, 7, 8, all the way up to 10. And then I will use my straight edge one more time, making sure that my straight edge is touching both of those points. There we go. And now I have the graph. It says draw and label a line for grasshopper green and gorgeous green. So I need to go ahead and label these. My first one, the pink one, I remember was the pink color right here. It's grasshopper green. So I'm going to label that so I don't forget that this line is showing grasshopper green, because I will probably forget which one is which. And then it says label the other line too. So my purple one I was using on this table, which was gorgeous green. It's nice just to have, even if you're using different colors, it's nice to label your lines so you can tell them apart. And especially if I was just using pencil and everything was the same color, it would be difficult for me to remember which line was which, okay? So the only thing left to do is number 10, and it's not any writing, it's just talking about it. It says, discuss how the graphs can be used to decide which paint is more blue, less blue, more yellow, and less yellow. And basically what you'll notice, or what I would like you to notice, is right here on the graph, we have our y-axis is talking about how much yellow we have. And our x-axis is talking about how much blue that we have. So you can look at the lines on your graph and you can learn some information about them. So again, this isn't something to write down in an answer. If we were in class, we would just have a class discussion about it. So I'll just kind of do a discussion all by my lonesome self for you guys. So it's basically just noticing which has more blue, less blue, more yellow, or less yellow. So I would say if we look at grasshopper green first versus gorgeous green, which one has more yellow? Well, the higher you get, right, grasshopper green over here, they're starting to have more yellow in it, okay? Which should make sense because over here, we said which paint is more yellow? Grasshopper green, okay? And from our picture, we could also see which one has less yellow. Well, I can tell that gorgeous green has less yellow because its line is lower on the y-axis. So the y-axis is talking about yellow. And so grasshopper green is higher on the y-axis, gorgeous green is lower on the y-axis. So gorgeous green has less yellow, which is what we said here. Grasshopper green has more yellow, gorgeous green has less yellow. And we're just proving that on our graph, okay? Then it's talking about blue on our other axis. So which one has more blue and which one has less blue? Well, if you're talking about your x-axis, that's going left to right. So left to right, I can see that my grasshopper green has less blue because it's shoved more to the left of my graph. And the gorgeous green has more blue because it's more to the right side of my graph. So grasshopper green should be less blue, gorgeous green more blue. Let's check. Grasshopper green has less blue, which is what we said, and gorgeous green is more blue, which is what we said. So all that is basically showing you a couple ways to figure out your information. If you fill out a table, you can tell which one has more or less by forcing one of the colors to be equal and then finding the matching color next to it, which one is more or less, okay? But also on a graph, if you study which one's taller, then it has more of that color. If it's shorter, it has less of that color. And then same going left to right. If it's more to the left of your graph, it has less of that color. If it's more to the right of your graph, it has more of that color. So it's basically just showing you there's a couple of ways to look at ratios and comparing different things. You can use a graph or you can use a table. We're using a little bit of patterns from the beginning of the year, like factor tables and multiplying the same number on the left and right side of our table. So just kind of a little bit of a review from the beginning of the year. It's going to get more complicated as we keep going. But this was a nice quick lesson. That is actually it for 7-1. So I know our last two videos have been almost an hour. One of them was a little over an hour. So this is kind of making up for that a little bit. This is about 23 minutes. So that's it. Good luck with the homework. And we have one more lesson this week. So I'll see you guys again tomorrow.